John, thank you so much for having me here at Glenturret. What a beautiful location.
No worries. Thanks for coming.
It's been here for a few centuries now.
Yeah. So we started around 1763. Although we are a little bit older than 1763, but now we've got our official rental document from 1763 that was signed to say that the Glenturret Distillery, and we have a map to show that this is where that was around then. So because we've got official documentation, that's why we use the 1763. But yeah, been around for a while.
And it seems to me you just have such an old building, an old company, very modern ideas. And the room we're in now is just exquisite. I said to you earlier, it reminds me of going to a winery in the Napa Valley. It is a level of luxury which you don't ordinarily see, and it's fantastic. What made you go down this direction?
One of the things you see when you go through the vineyards, like you just mentioned there in Napa Valley, is a way in which they have learned to celebrate their terroir through gastronomy and high-end gastronomy. And that's something that the Scottish whisky industry has never done. And it struck us that it was a real opportunity. With our new ownership, who really understand wine, they own 5 vineyards between the 2 owners that we have, so they knew that world really well. And our restaurant here is not the kind of restaurant where you have whiskey sauce with your chicken breasts, or there's a whiskey paired to every single course you have. It's not. It's just a genuine gastronomic experience that celebrates the terroir of the distillery, whether that's the sweet Sicily that's been foraged locally, or the Giro mushrooms that are foraged locally. I mean just outside our back door here. Or the barley that we take from the production process and turn that into sourdough breads that you eat as your meal. Or the 3 temperatures that we mash in the mash tun. Those temperatures have been replicated through some of the cooking methods. And therefore the distillery truly is in your food when you eat here. And that's something that others have done really well, and we really wanted to inspire the whisky industry to do the same.
And also the other thing which is delightful is that you actually have a whole range of other whiskies from other distilleries behind your bar. And I love that. It's absolutely a fantastic element. And also, I think you mentioned earlier on before we started recording that by virtue of the fact that you're becoming a destination for the restaurants, the community is benefiting from that in terms of the local B&Bs are filling up. Exactly.
Just touching on your first point there, the bar, that was a conscious decision. You know, we could have put just Glenturret on there, and we've got Glenturret through the years on there, so they've got 1967 liquid sitting on the bar there from Glenturret, so it's great to be able to taste through the generations. However, we really want to celebrate the category. We really want to celebrate single malt Scotch, and the good thing about single malt is that there's so much demand for it that we don't need to compete against each other. So why not celebrate your friends and your colleagues? And if a whisky company is going to do a whisky bar, then the expectations are quite high. So we really wanted to make sure that we weren't going to go down the road of having the most expressions or go down the road of having the most prestigious collection. We wanted to have iconic pours. So we've got Lafroig 10 on there, we've got Jura Superstition on there, we've got as well as some really, really unicorn drams that we've worked hard to try and find. And some cracking Glenturrets. Everything that Glenturret's ever made should be on that bar. So that was the concept behind the bar, and that took a lot. But to your point, and it's really important to us, the local community we are part of, we have been part of since 1763. And that's something you can't forget. I mean, new owners have come and gone, but Glenturret has always been in the area of Crieff. And therefore, being able to do something that makes a destination and therefore draws people to it is really important to the local economy. And we've had owners of local bed and breakfasts and owners of local hotels who have contacted us to say we're so grateful because we've got guests who are coming and saying, oh, we're just here to visit the Glenturret restaurant, and that's boosting that economy. The other benefit to the town is when you want to open a world-class gastronomic experience restaurant, you need to look further afield. So we searched the world for our staff to open this restaurant. Mark Donald wasn't so far. He was in Edinburgh. He was retained their Michelin star at Balmoral for a couple of years, and then he moved him and his team up to Crieff to take on this project. Julien Beltsung was working at 2 Michelin star over the 4 Seasons in Hong Kong as their sommelier across there. We moved him from there across to Crieff. Emilio was working at Hester Blumenthal's Fat Duck, and then moved to Lonclume, and then moved to a restaurant in Spain, and we moved him back to Crieff. So we really have brought this world-class team together, and they're all now living in this town. When the Glenturret was acquired in 2019, there were 28 staff on board. There's now 53 staff, so it's more people that have been brought into the town or employed from the town to really take this distillery to its next chapter and its next stage in its life.
Yeah, that's actually an incredible investment.
Yeah.
Which is a relatively small restaurant as well. How many covers have you got in the restaurant?
30 covers or 6 tables, depending what comes first. But it's very small. It's dinner only. So we do have a lunch in the bar. The area we're sitting in here, we can do afternoon teas. But the restaurant is preserved for dinner only 5 nights a week. So it's really got its eye set on gastronomy. A lot of the plates you would eat with us, of which, depending on the season, you can have anywhere between 10 or 12 courses in our multi-tasting menu. Some of them take 2 or 3 days to make. The chefs are always working at guests 3 days in advance.
Yeah, it's certainly on Michelin's radar anyway, going forward. But talk to us about the wonderful new bottle design that you have, because I think Glenturret is wonderful for the consumer. For number one, you can pronunciate it, which is, as a former sommelier, we can never sell German wines because people are embarrassed to order something. And as a whiskey journalist, there's some whiskies I don't know, or I forget how to pronunciate it all. So great start, obviously, thanks to them centuries ago for and the hills and the mountains. Good on them. But what was the brief for the new design?
The bottle, Glenrothes bottle, that Glenrothes bottle, that bulb shape, is iconic. And when you look at it in the back bar, as you're walking up towards the back bar, you can spot that bottle. We wanted something similar. We wanted a bottle that would really be Glenturret, and that's why we chose to keep that same design all the way through the range, from the non-age statement Triplewood to our extremely scarce range of 25 and 30-year-old. It's the same bottle, same shape, same weight. The 25 and 30-year-old have been personalised by getting hand finished in the Lalique factory in Wingen. But the square shape to our bottle, the high shoulders, the small base, the thick glass punt on the base, the stripes on the side are all designed to make it really stand out on the shelf, really illuminate. We recognise that having not a huge volume of Glenturret, the best place for us to be is on the back bar at some restaurants and bars and hotels around the world. So we really wanted a bottle that would be recognisable and B, really stand out from being different from the rest. Yeah,
and it's been very, very well received, I think, and it's great throughout the range and having that consistency. I want to touch briefly on your last year. You released your collaboration with Jaguar, celebrating the E-Type, and I'm loving, as a car guy, the whiskey and car relationship with Callum. Just recently with sort of Bentley, Bowmore, Aston Martin, new Jaguar. I think it's lovely. Tell me about how that came about.
So Jaguar have worked with the Lalique Group for quite some time now, and they've had a really strong collaboration. So when the Lalique Group were part of the joint venture that purchased the distillery, Jaguar said, look, we've got the 60th anniversary of the E-Type coming up. We'd love to do something special. For that, would you consider doing the whiskey for us? So of course, the E-Type is probably the most iconic car of all time. I mean, everyone recognises an E-Type. It's got those beautiful lines. It was so ahead of its time when it was launched. So we jumped at the chance to do something for that E-Type 60th anniversary. But actually, when you started digging into the story, which you do as a brand collaboration, you need to learn a bit about the brand that you're working with. The Coventry to Geneva story, where they were at the Geneva Motor Show, they recognised that they had brought their own car, they brought their coupe, they really should have brought their soft top, because that's what everyone was going crazy for. So they phoned Norman Jewis, the race driver, to race the soft top over to Geneva. He just made it in time, and actually that was what kicked off the whole success of the E-Type. We just saw so many similarities between that story and things that we'd already uncovered in the history of Glenturret, moments in time where if you hadn't made that effort, perhaps Glenturret would have been lost into the history books. But somebody made the right decision at the right time to do the right thing, and it moved on to the next century and kept on going. And that really resonated with us. So yeah, we're really proud to bring that collaboration to life.
Yeah. And what do you see as it sounds a daft question perhaps, the future of Scottish whisky, because you've got a lot of craft distilleries opening up now in Scotland and around the world. How do you see the market moving forward in, say, 10 or 15 years' time? It's obviously very hard to predict, but any ideas, any consolidations, the smaller distilleries perhaps being absorbed by the larger ones? What are your thoughts?
There are two trains of thought on this. The consolidation thought is probably easiest seen in the brewery industry, where we went through that craft explosion in breweries. And we're now starting to find out that, the Amarzens and things are starting to conglomerate them all, keeping them small craft but under a larger umbrella. That may happen. Whiskey's a tricky business. You need a long investment before you start to get the return on investment in whiskey, so you need to take a really long view. The other model that we could see would be down the wine route. And, there's no limits to the number of expressions in wine that you can see around the world. Certainly France holds that territory above New World traditionally, and as you go through the hierarchy of wines in France, you can see that hierarchy still exists in terms of the really Premier Grand Cru designated back in 1700, Chateau Lafite Périgueux and Sauternes designated by Napoleon. Those stories exist and can cohabit with multitude of expressions in the category. So the other model is that actually it just becomes a really rich territory, and by all working together we recruit more consumers into whiskey and brown spirits, and we celebrate the craft, and we celebrate the position that some of the premium voluminous brands have, and then we celebrate brands like Glenturret is, which is super premium, low volume, and therefore it's a really bespoke boutique product. So everyone has their space, and I'd love that to be the model that we see, but I can't write off that that brewery model might actually happen.
Yeah. Going back to design, do you remember the first time you were out as a customer in a iconic bar and saw the new brand new Glenturret sitting there on the bar?
Yeah.
Where was that? Tell me about that.
Took quite a lot at Grantley Hall in Yorkshire. It's a beautiful hotel. But I was down there for an event, and I remember it was the first time I walked into any bar anywhere in quite some time, especially this year. But then to see the Glenturret two expressions, the triple wood and peat smoke, were sitting on the back bar. It was a really special moment, actually. I probably took far too many pictures of it on my camera phone and sent them to everybody, and I'm sure it wasn't very as interesting to some people as it was to others. But that moment can't really be compared to anything else, where you've, especially over the last few years, where we've brought this brand to life during lockdown. We launched it in September 2020, where we had to hire 4 rooms at Gleneagles, and I was in one room with the camera person. Ian and Bob were in a different room with a static camera. Another room had the camera operators, and another room had the marketing team, because we couldn't all be in the same room at the same time. So to have brought a product to life that way, I recruited all of our distributors over Zoom. We exported all of our products, and they sold out in 7 months last year. 25-year-old sold out in 4 months last year. This year, 25-year-old sold out in 4 weeks. So it was doing incredibly well. But you didn't have that connection to the end consumer, and starting to get that now. There's no feeling like it.
And a lot of this magazine can be read by Instagram. It's very much a community magazine. How important is social media to you as a company?
Incredibly important, and that consumer interaction is something that we love and we seek. We go out and actively try to seek that, and you can get it through social media. You can get involved in conversations on social media that involve your brand, and you can actually ask why is that? What are you looking for here? What can we do better there? And that's such a unique opportunity. Yes, it's great to get positive feedback, and we love, of course, hearing the positive things. But actually, we're also keen to grow and develop and get better. So any of our consumers that have constructive feedback for us, we welcome that also. So social media gives you a chance to get closer to the consumer. And perhaps it has been through lockdown, but consumers are so much better educated now than they ever were before. And they're so much in tune with the brand and why they choose a brand specifically. And therefore, it's gone are the days where you can just tell an old Scottish story about a whiskey and just send it off to market. You really need to know your stuff, you need to know the detail, and you need to be completely honest and transparent with the consumer, because if you don't, they'll find out.
Yeah. And also it's about, I think as a wine guy, you can get every single glass of wine you become analytical about.
Yep.
And actually there comes a point where, certainly in my life, I'm actually enjoying this as much as I should be.
Yeah.
I'm not drinking a first growth, which cost me hundreds of pounds. So actually, I just enjoy this.
Yeah.
This glass of wine. I think that should go through to whiskey as well, which comes on to the sort of monumental task, I guess, that the Bob has got, because obviously he's inherited all these casks which historically went into blending to create these amazing age statement expressions now. Just sort of give the audience a little bit of what Bob's doing, the scale of what he's got to do compared to someone who's only been making single malt whiskey. Yeah,
exactly. I think when we purchased the distillery in 2019, we inherited 1 million litres of aging spirit, which was great. When you are making whiskey for a blend, you've got a specific character in mind. When you're making whiskey for a single malt, you've got a specific character in mind, and those two are very different characters. You need different things for that. You're painting two completely different pictures, and therefore need two completely different sets of colours. That's not to say that all of our whiskey was blending stock, because Glenturret produced 200 to 215,000 litres of alcohol a year. 50% of that went into the Famous Grouse, and 50% was kept back for single malt. So I guess we were fortunate in the fact that we weren't exclusively a blending distillery. But as you said, Bob has to take this palette of colours and translate it into this palette of colours and create a single malt, which the awards have shown he's done incredibly well with. But it just shows his extreme talent. And the first thing that Bob did when he arrived, and we were quite intimidated, Bob Delgarno is a big name in the industry and not somebody who does any press or any media. He's a very private person, and he just likes to get on with his job. His famous quote is, "I'm just a whiskey maker." It's the name above the door that's more important. So you're working with those kind of characters, and you can probably name 3, 4, 5 other characters throughout the art world or the wine world who are similar to that. They're just really dedicated to their job. So Bob, his first thing he did was put his overalls on and rolled casks around the warehouse, sampled himself, nosed the casks himself, and just built up a picture in his head about what he was working with straight away. He doesn't go into a computer and check spreadsheets and see ages. He actually opens the casks, and he builds his whiskies through intuition and feeling, and he just creates these amazing whiskies through his senses, not through anything that's directed by finance or anything that's directed by me. I'd love to be able to say to Bob, "Look, Bob, I want 10,000 bottles of that, so you need to put it at 42%. It's just not the relationship we have. You don't have somebody like Bob in your stable and then put limits on him as to what he can do, can and can't do. So every one of our whiskies, every year, are a complete fresh creation that Bob has made and presented at his ABV, his style, and a representation of the best that we have to offer that year."
Yeah, and it's walking around what is just striking to me and just brings joy to me, is that they're filling the cask with new make spirit, which is what beautiful. The nose, it was just incredible. So fruity. It was wow. It blew me away. And then there's rolling over to weigh the barrels, and it's on an old Avery scale with the weight sliders.
Yeah.
And he was looking at it a little bit perplexed. I was standing on it.
Yeah.
I'd had an extra 10 kilos in 1 foot. I hadn't realised. It's like, it's amazing to see that history. That's still here in those very historic practices, and in those modernity hasn't come into all aspects of the business, and it's just got that there. Then you've got this here, and it's just I love that juxtaposition.
Quite the opposite, actually. We try to repel modernity in the whiskey making process. We believe that the time that it takes one of our still operators to become skilled enough to make that whiskey is the time that it takes, and there's no shortcutting that. That there are no computer sensors here at Glenturret. There are no automatic valves. Everything is done by hand. All the cuts are done by eye. Using that Avery scale is important to us. It's an important part of our process. And therefore, we actually invest in staying old, and it's quite a strange concept. Normally you invest to synergize or improve process flow, but actually we're investing to protect the way that we've always made it, because actually we think that's what makes Glenturret special.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually got the opportunity to speak to Bob earlier on as we were passing, and he, again, so humble, and it just occurred to me that his job is so skilled that if you think to Japan, it takes 7 or 8 years for a sushi chef to become a fully qualified grand. That's cutting a slice of fish.
Yep.
Here you've got 1 million litres of whiskey to put together. Yep. It's mind-boggling. The actual you don't necessarily appreciate the skill that's required. So just finishing off, you sort of have 3 pillars of your business.
Yep.
Perhaps in a succinct way, just go through those 3 pillars of what you're hoping to achieve or trying to achieve.
Yeah. So when we were acquired and the Glenturret brand became back to prominence again, the Famous Grouse Experience fell away. Famous Grouse came in 2002 and only finished in 2019. So there's a large chunk of time where Glenturret was not really focused on or dedicated. So we actually had to go back and really rediscover what makes the Glenturret the Glenturret. And I think the most important work that team did was to highlight these 3, or boil all that down into 3 words, which was provenance, prowess, and passion. Provenance, really simply, is that oldest working distillery in Scotland, and that care and attention that we pay to our history. I talk a lot about that. I see my role as just a custodian. I mean, one of the things that in the whisky industry, for sure, you get this, but I think at Glenturret especially, you realise that I'm only working with the whisky that somebody else laid down for me, and I'm laying down whisky that somebody else is going to benefit from. We're just working with the bit in the middle, so it's teamwork with people that came before us and people that are coming after us. So that provenance is something that's really important to us here at Glenturret, and that our history, our heritage, our integrity when it comes to that is really important. Prowess, it's all about the craftsmanship and the skill of our production operators. Ian Rennick has been with us for 25 years now. Started when he was a teenager here at the distillery, and a lot of the fixtures and fittings that we saw around the site, the metal, were him. Ian, as an apprentice blacksmith, were making those. Even when he wasn't working at the distillery, he was connected to the distillery. So his knowledge about how you make Glenturret is unbeatable. You couldn't just bring somebody else in. Ian has been here since a man and boy, and that I think he more than anyone personifies the prowess that we have when it comes to the skill of hand making whiskey and crafting that whiskey. And then passion, we really like to think starts leaning into our collaboration with Lalique, our French sister company, and Lalique still hand blow all their crystal. They still use clay furnaces. We still make this here, and there's a passion that comes from that. You have to be committed to stay doing things that way. And like I said earlier, you need to invest in doing things the traditional way, and that can only come through passion. Those decisions don't make sense on a balance sheet. They make sense when you're passionate about your product. So provenance, prowess, and passion, we believe, is what is uniquely Glenturret.
That's a perfect way to finish. John, thank you very much.
Thanks for your time. I appreciate it.